There are some issues that need to be talked about, but they're hard to talk about. One of those issues is domestic violence. I am here on location today with Taffiney Williams on the set of her Breaking the Silence documentary dealing with this very topic. Taffiney, thank you so much for allowing me to stop by and talk about this with you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you
Absolutely.
for coming.
And not only am I getting to interview you, you gave me the opportunity to share a little bit about my story with domestic violence. I know how challenging it can be to break the silence about domestic violence, as I have experienced it myself. I know that you have shared your testimony on many platforms, and there's many ways that you are telling your own stories and helping others to do the same. But you made a decision to dedicate time to creating a documentary on domestic violence. Why did you decide to break your silence?
You know, I was literally standing as my daughter was being granted her divorce based on domestic violence. And it hit me. I thought I got my kids out early enough. I thought this was a story that we didn't have to relive. And as we were sitting and visiting with the attorney afterwards, and he was telling me some of the statistics, I started to think there are so many people that are suffering in silence, and there's so much stigma that's attached to domestic violence and being able to find safe places, that these are stories that need to be heard. No one had really heard a lot of my story. Like you say, I do teach people how to tell their story from a stage, in a book, in a documentaries. But this was an opportunity that I saw to bring people out of the shadows, to bring the stigma out of the shadows, and start having these conversations on a more often basis. So that's kind of what birthed it. And it literally was one of those things where I said, okay, God, this is what you want done. You're going to have to show me how to do it. And so I just really put it on paper, started doing the research, and was just truly blown away from what I found during the research time.
What did you find during that research time? Was these statistics that spoke about domestic violence?
They were statistics, and it was also some of the stories that I heard that were like, oh my gosh. One of the statistics that was really interesting to me was the fact that 1 in 4 women, but like 1 in 9 men.
Wow.
And so those are things that we don't hear about. And I'm sure there's underreporting, especially when it comes to the men as well. There's underreporting with the women as well.
Absolutely.
You know, a lot of people, there's shame, that's, guilt, and all of the things that go along. And then there's all the victim blaming and all of the things that we're not aware of that we may actually be doing that keeps a victim from being able to come and have a safe place to share those things. So it made me want to see what resources are out there. How do law enforcement handle these situations? Where can a person go? What is their story? And the second thing I found was that there was a lot of abuse going on right inside of our churches, unfortunately. And that was a whole different situation that I said, oh, wow, do we really want to tackle this? And I feel like it's something that needs to be talked about.
Right. So what do you hope would be the outcome of this documentary?
My desire is to, one, give a voice to what they consider to be voiceless, so that they can get to tell their stories, not the stories of all the trauma, drama, but the overcomer part of it. All of these people that I have met that have agreed to come on in this documentary are overcomers. They're not just survivors. They have learned how to thrive and not let this pain be a part of their end story, but the passion that they've gained through their journey now, most of them are utilizing that same passion to help other people. So my desire is that there's more awareness, number one. There's more resources and how to get to the resources, number 2. And number 3, that there is help even for the person that is the offender. Because usually people that have offended, that are offenders, have been offended in some kind of way.
Right.
So bringing light to that and understanding where to turn, how to operate, and just how to move through this and bring it out of the shadows. That's the biggest piece, is there needs to not be the stigma that is attached to it, so people feel like they're safer being able to talk to someone and maybe move out of a domestically violent situation.
Wow. As I was answering some of the questions that you asked, I didn't even realize some of those emotions that were still there, and even how, as I was responding, a lot of what I said was in retrospect. Like looking back, I realized. Now that I see, I realize. I think that other survivors have stories similar, where at the time we didn't even always know we were being abused or that it was as severe as it was. Do you find other survivors that have experienced various forms of domestic violence, because we know there's more than just one, that see things much differently now that they are outside than how they saw it when they were inside?
Most definitely, which is also why I think it's important for us to understand the resources that are available. A lot of those resources will give us like warning signs. There's almost like a list of different things. Have you experienced this? Do you find this? And you kind of hinted on that in your conversation, that a lot of people don't even know that they're being affected by domestic violence because a person hasn't physically hit them.
Right.
And statistics say that by the time there is an actual physical hit, you've been being abused for a long time.
Agree.
It is a grooming process. It's the intimidation. It's the manipulation. It's all of the stuff that goes on before. The tearing down of character, the feeling like, oh, this is the only place, the isolation. There's so many things that go on in this grooming space that a lot of people, by the time that first hit comes, by the time they feel intimidated or scared, they are already brainwashed to a different point. So unpacking that once you do get out of the situation takes time. And you can't say it takes, 6 months, 6 weeks, 3 years. You can't say that. I literally had something to happen or a certain tone one day, and I was like, boom, it kind of reminded me. No, it doesn't paralyze me anymore. But it reminded me that this is an area that's not whole yet. It's healed, but it's not whole yet. So in talking with thrivers, overcomers, survivors, I see it time and time again. Retrospect, we heard the saying, hindsight is 20/20.
Right.
And it is. They think differently. They speak differently. They respond differently. So it is definitely in retrospect. So I personally feel that if we can get it out in front of people earlier on, that they will be able to identify those red flags and be able to make the choice to move around and not stay in those situations.
Amazing. So I hear ultimately that there's going to be a diversity of ways that this can impact people, raising awareness. Maybe even a victim who is currently in domestic violence may hear a story and go, wait, this is abuse? Maybe somebody will know they're in domestic violence but don't feel they can get out, and they'll see a story, hear a story that brings them to a place of hope. So this is really limitless, the outcome it could produce.
It is very much so. And one of the things I want to kind of piggyback on what you said is sometimes it's that story, it's your story that really matters, because you become a face of hope for someone. If I had not seen someone be able to walk away from their marriage and thrive, I would not have thought I could do it either.
Right.
So yes, definitely.
So those inspiring stories and empowering, because it's one thing to be inspired and to be stirred up emotionally, but it's another thing to have, like you said, resources or specific methods of how to get out. So will your documentary include any kind of like resources, where like phone numbers or agencies? Do you have things that you can give to survivors that, hey, if you've identified you're in an abusive relationship, tell us a little more about what we can anticipate seeing throughout, not just the actual documentary, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of media things surrounding it.
There will be a lot of media surrounding it. And yes, there will be resources that are available. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is that the National Hotline for Domestic Abuse is available in over 200 languages. So it matters not what language or culture you come from. You can pick up that phone and you can get a voice on the other end that can speak your language. There's also a way that you can text. If you're not in a safe place where you can pick up and call, you can text a specific text to a specific number, and you can begin a text dialogue back and forth with someone that can support you through that space. So all of these things will be available. They'll be, throughout the space, and those are national numbers. There will also be, we had the opportunity to speak in with some of our local law enforcement to see what can we expect if there is a call that goes out and there's someone that comes in to your home to help you through a domestically violent situation. What are some of the things that they're able to provide for you? There are shelters out there. There are literally, they actually, I found out they have kennels, because a lot of abusers will say, I'm going to hurt your animals if you leave. So they're not leaving because they don't want their animals to be hurt. So they even have kennels where you can bring your animals with you into the shelters. There's child care, there's transportation, there's free counseling, free therapy. I mean, I thought that was amazing that these are things that are available. There's clothing. There's all of the things, help with getting you into your own place. Some financial help for helping to pay rent or utilities, or all of those things are available. And who knows about them? Not very many people. So one of the reasons that we've learned just in the research is that one of the major reasons why people stay is they're not in a space to financially take care of themselves. So they return back to their abuser. Statistics also say that a lot of times there's 7 different offenses before a person decides to leave. So they may leave 7 times but go back and return to those spaces. What are those reasons? We kind of hinted on what would the church think? What would my family think? How's this going to affect my children? I don't have a place to stay. All of these other things. So the resources that we will be able to put in front of people, or at least point them in the right direction to get those, is something that we're going to focus on definitely in this documentary as well.
That's huge, because the stories can bring inspiration, but this is what brings action.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important and amazing. So in interviewing or in pre-interviewing some of the people that are going to take place in this documentary, do you find that a lot of them struggle to relive some of what they've went through, or have you found people that are all the way out and that tear doesn't come to their eye? What's your experience working with victims been like?
I am so thankful, and it's so interesting how God works. I went and got my trauma-informed coaching certification back maybe about a year ago, and I thought it was for whatever other reason, but as I see all the skill sets that the Lord has brought me through and to, I understand that they were all things that were going to be needed for probably this particular thing. Because I have literally had to walk people through processes of saying, okay, we understand that this is re-traumatized, or it's at least brought up something that we might need to some healing or something that goes on here. But to see them like totally fall apart, no. Most of them have gotten to a space of healing, maybe not wholeness, but they've gotten to a space of healing that the stinger is gone now. Right? And yes, is there tears? I'm sure there's going to be tears. And in my pre-interview spaces, yes, there has been. Even raising a little bit of anxiety in that. But being able to use that time to say, you're in a safe place. You are safe. You are safe. You're sharing your story, you're safe. And then hearing from them maybe a day or so later, like, thank you so much for letting me know I was safe in that space and I could share my story.
Amazing, because it is hard to talk about sometimes. I do consider myself to be not just a survivor, but a thriver. However, the tears still come because I can remember. And my hope would only be that somebody who felt some of those same emotions or is feeling them when they watch that they can connect with that and also see you can make it out. And so I love it. I think this is such an important thing. Now, you mentioned the church earlier. How can the church support something like this?
You know, I think that it's very important that the church gets behind this, because people walk in those doors. I was one of those. Walk in that door hurting every week, week after week, and walk out hurting week after week. They're not able to identify where there may be a problem, right? And I think that the more that the church is aware of the signs, the more they talk about it and create a safe place for people who are in spaces that are being victimized can come and be able to say, hey, this is an issue. knowing the right channels to take when someone does come to you, I think is very important. So bridging the gap between resources and the places where the people may be that need the resources, I think is definitely something that we need to look at. So getting this in front of the churches and the church coming on board to pray for this effort to, take the stance of getting the information and creating a space where someone can maybe even text them like, hey, I need help, whatever, a certain sign or something where they can become more active and get behind it financially. One of the things that when I was talking to the people at the Domestic Violence Center is that they provide all of these services for free. And by them being able to provide them for free, they can't do it for free. Right? There's
Somebody's paying
somebody's
for it.
paying for it. Being able to pay rent for somebody, or being able to pay for child care for someone, or being able to get clothing for someone to be able to get back and forth to work, pay for gas or whatever. I think that if the churches come together and support in that way, it would really make a difference as well.
Excellent. I think it's so important emotionally, financially, materially, that churches would engage with this movement. I know that we know churches sometimes will look at feeding programs, homeless shelters, or feeding the homeless on the street, giving away clothes, giving away food. But I don't know that this particular area has that much support. And, we can't say it's everywhere. There may be many churches doing it, but I have not personally seen many that really get behind domestic violence in a very aggressive way. So I join with you in wanting to see more from the faith community. So what about agencies, local agencies, other outreaches, maybe first responders, police, fire, medics, hospitals? Is there a way that there can be partnership, to help our victims of domestic violence, or to connect with what you're doing? How can others that may not be in the religious circles help you?
Well, finance is always the thing, right? It's always funding, and funding to be able to put more of these projects together so that we can get these documentaries into the high schools possibly, so that people in the high schools, they understand, especially in our colleges, on our college campuses. I really believe that if we put something like this, if we're able to create these type of documentaries where we're not just talking about the survivors and their journey, but how to get to the resources, I think that would be great, because it's going to let them be able to see the warning signs before it gets too bad. And maybe we can get ahead of this thing, helping people to understand their value, understanding who they really are and that they don't deserve to be treated this way, and shifting the trajectory of how they think about it and how they speak about it. I think it'd be amazing. As far as the collaboration of different resources, after visiting with our local people, I did find out that when a person gets to a space where they're brave enough, that courage comes in, and they decide to step away and they go to law officials, they automatically connect them with the services that they need, whether it be child protective services, whether it be the domestic violence shelters, whether it be addiction areas. Sometimes people, you go into addiction as a coping mechanism.
Self-medication.
There's self-medication. And so whatever those things are, I do know that in my local area that those people are definitely connected. In some of the smaller, more rural communities, it's a little bit different. A lot of them don't even have shelters for people to go to. So you're a mom, you're getting abused, or you're a dad and you're getting abused, and you're out in the middle of the rural county. You don't have a place that you can go for the night to be safe. So getting the larger communities to start looking in and be available to the rural communities, I think would also be an amazing thing as far as connecting the resources and the collaboration that these different organizations are already doing in some of the larger communities.
Amazing. And I would have never even thought about that. And I've lived in both urban and very rural communities, and I know there can be a 20 to 30 minute wait calling an officer or a ambulance in places where I have lived, and that can be very severe, let alone if you're trying to find a place to stay. So wow, I can see already just from the behind the scenes talk how important it is that more information goes out and people are able to not only know, but not know that it's an issue, but know how they can connect. So anyone ultimately could support, whether it's through the material resources, sharing it once this documentary is completed, sharing it on whatever their platforms are, whether it's a link or a flyer, and making sure that everyone is aware of what's going on. Because I believe there are people being abused probably in just about every family somewhere. It might be, the cousin you don't talk to. And I think if every individual makes it their priority to be aware of these kinds of truths and these pieces of information, then we can all become advocates in our world. So what are some ways you think an individual could just become an advocate for someone who's experiencing abuse?
One of the things, I have a ministry called Journey to Impact, because we're all on a journey. We're going to impact this world one way or the other, which again is part of my story, right? One of the things that we do is we write encouragement cards to the shelter, to the people that are in the shelters. You would be amazed. We're in a life of technology. You would be amazed at what a handwritten note to a survivor would mean. Getting together and writing prayer cards or writing support cards or encouragement cards to the women who have been courageous enough to step away, and taking those to our local shelter or local places where domestic violence is there. I think that is one of the places where a person can get connected. Also, being able to volunteer, call your local domestic violence shelters and see if there are some volunteer opportunities, whether it be watching the kids while the moms are in therapy, whether it be, taking a mom out for lunch or dinner, whatever it may be. There are always places where we can plug in and get involved in it. I was also made aware that there are, with our law enforcement, there are like different little classes that you can go to see how they are working alongside the domestic violence shelters, or the, we talk about sexual assault and domestic assault at the same time, how they're working, and see what they're doing and plug into those places to be able to help out there as well.
I think that's so important, because it can feel overwhelming to think about, how can I make a difference in this? And you just pointed out some really amazing ways that you can support those in domestic violence without necessarily going in and trying to physically break up a fight or rescue someone yourself. And I think it's even important to say, we don't want you to do anything that you're not trained or equipped to do.
No, definitely not.
You've made some really good points about ways you can get involved in just small areas that make a big impact. So these cards, that's very inspiring. And you might be somebody that loves thrift store shopping. Maybe you can go get some clothes and bless the ladies, or, the list goes on, but it sounds like just love, care, consider people's regular everyday life needs, find an agency, shelter, someone you can partner with. So this documentary is going to inspire, it's going to empower, it's going to give information, and it's going to, I believe, invite people to be a part of the movement of helping others break the silence. Now, we just have a few minutes left, and I want to go back to the victims. What would you say to a victim right now who is someone who's been victimized, who's surviving, maybe thriving, but they have not told their story? How important is it? Does everyone have to tell their story? Who should, who shouldn't? Speak to that survivor, that whether they are just kind of making it out, healed, like you said, but not whole, or they're thriving. Speak to those people about what you think they need to know about the importance of their story as it relates to domestic violence.
I can tell you two things. One of the things one of my mentors told me early on is that what's hidden can't be healed. So keeping it locked up and inside not only robs other people from being able to see the beauty of what has happened all the way through the process. You get to be a face of hope for someone, whether it is your own children, because that's what it was for me. That's as far as I wanted to go. I was able to talk to my children, and prayerfully they wouldn't find themselves in those same situations, or be able to identify the warning signs before it got bad. Telling your story is important. Your stories matter so much. They matter to you, and they matter to those that are around you. And had it not been for people telling me their stories, I wouldn't have been courageous enough to leave. I was 16 when I married and went from the crazy of one situation into a whole new crazy of something that I didn't even know. And so your stories are so important to be able to share with yourself how far you've come. I know it sounds crazy, but I have been my own advocate for so long until just walking through, wow, I got up and put my clothes on today. Wow, I brushed my hair. Wow, I took a shower. I got dressed. I opened up my blinds. Wow, I was able to go out. Wow, I was able to tell somebody else my story. Wow, I was able to see that somebody else was suffering and they couldn't say anything. I cannot tell you how many times I've started a sentence and another survivor will finish that sentence. But if I never start the conversation, if I never share the story, they don't know they have a safe place where they can come and say, you know, I've never told anybody this, but. And that's what has happened so often. And that's why it's important for you to tell your story. People will know that they have a safe place to go. And it does help you just as much as it helps the other person.
I agree. I think that part of what we deal with in coming through these types of scenarios can be identity issues.
Oh, 100%.
Too. I'm even sensitive to use the word like survivor because it's not my identity. It's not my identity. However, it is an experience, but I can relate to it, use that vernacular if I need to, if I'm working on something like this. But the core of who a person is not defined by what they've been through. Their value is what it was prior to the abuse, it was while they were in the abuse, and it's definitely just as amazing after the abuse. The last thing I would ask you to speak to in our audience is, what would you want to say to someone who's struggling with her sense of value, identity, dignity after having been abused?
What I would say is this, and I have to go back to biblical because that's what I know. He knew us before he placed us in our mother's womb. Our purpose was there before. His original intent for our life did not change because of what happened to us. Our identity is in Christ. He tells us what we need to know about who we are. And we get to operate that in the fullness as we come into it. If you are in a situation right now and you don't know who you are, reach out to, pray for a mentor, a coach, a counselor, someone that can help you walk into that truth, and pick up your Bible and find out what it is that God says about you, because he knew you before that. And nothing changed because of what has happened to you. You get the opportunity to walk this thing out, not by yourself, but with Holy Spirit with you if you know him. So that is, I think, the biggest piece of identity. It's the 20% that moves the needle forward 80%. It's that little piece that seems huge to us, but it is the 20 that moves the needle forward 80.
Because if a person's stuck in feeling that this is just who I am, this is what I deserve, this is what I've been through, this is what I'll always be, this is always how I'm going to live, I think you will continue to repeat that cycle.
You do.
So getting in touch with your most authentic sense of identity, number one, dealing with you being a child of God, daughter or son of God, whatever the case may be, because as you've pointed out, domestic violence is not just for women, it happens to men also. And it's so important that we recognize and understand that our value is not determined by our abuser, but by our Creator. And I am believing, God, that he's going to continue to advance your cause of sharing the issue of domestic violence with the world, and that the church, communities of faith, all different backgrounds, denominations, whatever the case may be, will get behind this, because we need to have more advocacy in this area. So thank you, Taffiney, for being willing to give me a few minutes of your time as you're wrapping set from your various endeavors today here in the studio.
Yeah.
How can people get in touch with you to find out more?
Yeah, the easiest way to get in touch with me is just go to Taffiney.com. I try to keep everything on Taffiney.com so that no matter what it is that I'm doing, that it is represented there in that space. So that's TAFFINEY.com.
So you have been listening to Taffiney Williams discussing the Breaking the Silence documentary, as well as a couple of the other things she has going on, such as the Your Story Matters movement. Is that what we call it? Your Story Matters movement. Mm-hmm. And we could have a long list here today of all the things that she does and all the ways that you can connect with her. But do go to Taffiney.com to learn more, and we'll see you next time.